And it begins a bit sort of mysteriously. And certain men came down from Judea and taught the brethren.
Yeah.
So having had this new church begin, the excitement of it, already there's beginning to come people around who just want to infiltrate in it and begin to cause mischief.
Now, these men, these certain men from Judea, they were messianic, i.e. they were Jewish believers in Yeshua, Jesus, in Jerusalem. But the thing is, they hadn't been authorized to go and teach. They'd taken it upon themselves to go and do this. Right. And so that's what happens when you get unauthorized people saying unauthorized messages. They get the wrong end of the stick, basically.
Unofficial.
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 Unofficial. Yeah.
But later we see that Paul and Barnabas are being sent.
Yes.
That's official.
That's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm told we do have emails and texts working. So, if you'd like to email us or text on the things that we're talking about, then please send your email and text in, and we'll get a chance to read them a little later on in the program. So these certain men came down and they began to teach. And what's been established, of course, is a Gentile church.
Yes.
And because it was a Gentile church, they wouldn't know what the Old Testament had to say.
No.
And so they really are unaware of what the people are talking about and the rights and the wrongs of it. And so they're teaching about circumcision.
They are.
Unless you're circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. So Lawrence, fill us in a bit of a background.
Well, circumcision is quite an amazing thing. I mean, it started with Abraham, where the covenant was made with Abraham, and God tells Abraham to circumcise himself and his members of his family, and all of the servants who obviously weren't of the same faith as him. If they wanted to be in his family environment, they had to be circumcised. And then later on we're told that that circumcision for newborn babies is to take place on the 8th day of their life. Now that's very interesting. Why the 8th day? God is an amazing God, because on the 8th day of life, factor K, which is the blood clotting agent, is at its strongest in your entire life on your 8th day of life. So there you are, a drop of blood must be spilt, but the clotting happens immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So why was it important? I mean, that was said then. Why is it important? What's the significance of it?
It's the covenant with Israel via Abraham, and to a non-messianic Jew, being in the Jewish family, it's very important to have been circumcised in the correct manner by a rabbi on the 8th day. Now, there are all sorts of schools of thought as to the hygienic reasons for doing that in a secular manner. And many, I believe, many members of the royal family are circumcised, but they're not Jewish, obviously. But this, if you think about it, that condition to a Gentile, you know, who is an adult, is in these times must have been a horrendously difficult thing to do. And so that's why they later on have this Council of Jerusalem, don't they? And decide they cannot ask Gentiles to do that, but they'll set a number of things which are the Noahic rules, which referred back to Noah. And we can go into that later if you wish.
Okay, I mean, we were doing a mic check before we started, Peter, and you read verse 2 and you said, well, verse 1, you said, I disagree with that. Because you read out, didn't you, the statement, unless you're circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. Yeah. So, I mean, how could these people be Christians? I mean, they're saying something contrary to the whole of what we believe as Christians.
Well, what this whole thing is boiling down to is that these brethren, Judaizers, for want of a term, they are coming along and saying, yes, it is by faith, but it's also by the law that you're saved. As we're going to see later on, it is only, as Paul writes in Ephesians, let's just go there because that's interesting, Ephesians chapter 2. And he tells us exactly what it is to be saved. So Ephesians chapter 2.
Yeah.
verses 8 and 9. It's a scripture that is very often quoted. For he says in verse 8, "For it is by grace that you have been saved, through faith, and not that of yourselves. It is a gift from God, not of works, lest anyone should boast." So it's very clear the doctrine is that salvation is by faith, grace,